Yeah, I mean, the click-through on YouTube placements was brutal, just brutal. I mean, I think that, and we've talked about this before with Google ads as well, or specifically YouTube ads, is that, people just aren't there to see an ad. Something to consider is that if there is a platform that allows you to pay to not see ads, even if a person didn't already think an ad was an inconvenience, now they do, right? Like Spotify is the same way, right? You can pay money to no longer get ads. It sets a narrative in the user's mind that like, oh yeah, because ads are bad, right? So when they're using that platform, that's what they think. And that's something where I think, Facebook and Instagram kind of have a leg up.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome to the Creative Juice podcast. I am your co-host, Jack. With me is my co-host and your co-pilot, Corinne. What's up, Corinne?
Co-pilot. I feel so
Co-pilot.
fancy.
We've got all these dials and dashes and gauges. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I'm doing good. I've been testing the crap out of things, just as always, Most recently, I released my vinyl. I ordered my vinyl on July 1st of 2020, and they arrived on June 15th, 2021. So there's obviously a bit of a delay in the whole vinyl production scene, but it was really exciting to, so many people had pre-ordered, and then, to let everybody know that it came in, like it was a huge sigh of relief. And I'm sure like every musician understands that feeling, like whether it's that you are, trying to get a wrap on your studio time, or whether you are, trying to get the CDs in stock, or whether you finally launched, a campaign. Like just having a big project like that, being able to cross it off, like that'll put you in a good mood right away.
There's nothing like checking something off your to-do list, especially something that, waited 11 months to arrive at your door.
Oh
so I can only imagine the endorphin rush there.
Yeah. And it definitely was not planned to take that long. Black lacquer, which is, what the vinyl is basically carved into. There was a huge fire at the leading producer of black lacquer in LA, in February of last year, actually. So it was pre-pandemic, or before it got really bad. But then, so they burned down and it was a total loss. So they didn't even reopen. And then, the supplies for things, that were pandemic impacted just, really created a huge demand and not enough supply for vinyl in black. Short run pressed records that are in color or picture discs, things like that. That's a different material. So I've heard that that's not as bad, but if you just want black vinyl, woo, you're going to be waiting. Hopefully it'll clear up. But yeah, so it took a lot longer than I thought. And I was just really communicative with the fans. I mean, I think that's something that you have to do, and let them know what's happening. And I told everybody, I was like, if you pre-ordered and you're like, I'm over it and I don't want to wait anymore, like I offered everyone refunds. Literally no one asked for a refund, which was just incredible.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it really speaks to just how awesome my people are, and what that communication can do. So, if you're an artist and you're working on something and you feel like something's running behind, I think it's always, it's best to underpromise and overdeliver. But if you end up in a situation where that's just not an option because of circumstances out of your control, just be super communicative, and you'd be surprised if you're just authentic and transparent with people, how well they'll respond to it, So
right on. Yeah. It's so true. We saw a lot of that at the agency, in the past year with the pandemic and supply chain issues, a ton of that. And same principle applied, like just talking to the fans and telling them what was up. Surprisingly, like we didn't see a ton of people have a whole bunch of support backlash. It was great.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I wanted to share that because, today we're going to be talking about some other things that I've been working on. And, if you haven't been listening to us to a very long time, or, if you just want some more context, like, I am an independent musician. I've been, doing my music in a few different capacities for over 10 years. Actually, gosh, I'm getting old fast. My first EP came out in 2008. So a long time ago. It feels like so long. I know some of the people listening are like, that's not long. But to me, it feels like a very long time. And, the things that I test, it's one thing to be a marketer and understand marketing concepts. And, and Jack knows this as well at the agency, because Jack's done a lot of brick and mortar and digital company marketing outside of the music industry. And it doesn't completely translate one-to-one. I think an understanding that, it's not a completely different animal is probably a good, way to think about it. But there are some things that when you are running stuff for artists can be very different. And so when we bring stuff to this podcast, know that it's informed by that. I test and spend a ridiculous amount of my disposable income and my business income on these tests. So,
and your time, the most valuable resource.
Yeah, well, but it's also fun for me. So it's, I'm a big old nerd. And so,
Heard that.
But, the biggest reason I test is not just to gather this knowledge for myself, but so we can share it with you guys. So, yeah, I thought it'd be really cool. And Jack has been kind of nudging me for a little while. Because I am obviously very predisposed, I'd say, to running Facebook and IG ads. It's just kind of, I've hit a stride there. I'm very comfortable. I know how to navigate not just the system, from a tech point of view, but also getting things that, through review and making sure everything's compliant and understanding all of my tracking, which has changed a little with the iOS 14 update, but I'm familiar and fluent in that more and more and more because I've spent more and more money there, because I've made more and more money there. So, I have run a lot of Google ads in the past, which includes YouTube ads. And then I started getting into, today we'll talk about Snapchat ads and TikTok ads because I've been running those as well. And I've run a bunch of ads elsewhere too. And I'm actually starting to dive into some stuff in Hulu ads, which is actually,
Ooh.
I know, I have nothing to report on it yet, but I'll be sure to come back because I think that's going to be interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see if there's a way that we can merge that into becoming a music exposure platform. And I've run native Spotify ads as well. But I'm not going to go over those today because they were crap and I have nothing new to report from there. But so you guys know, like, this isn't stuff that I try once and it doesn't work and then I shut it off and say it's crap. I am constantly, I would say at least once a quarter, depending on how long the campaign is running, once a quarter, or maybe it's maybe it's twice a year if I'm running it for, a good period of time, because for test data, you can't just like flip it on for a few days and turn it off, but I'm constantly going back and revisiting. Same thing with our Greenlight countries list. If you're in the Indie Pro membership, you know that the Greenlight Warmth Boosting Training, which is our $1 a day traffic plan, which by the way is super affordable and you should totally go check out. There's a green light country list, and those countries are also tested on a quarterly basis. I'm constantly taking, a very pragmatic approach to it to try and be proven wrong. I would love for my assumptions to be knocked out of the park by something. So yeah, we shall see if that happened today. So
this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
This is going to be fun.
Yeah. So I think we're mostly going to focus on Google ads, Snapchat ads, and TikTok ads. What else do you think we're going to do today, Jack? Anything else?
I think those are kind of the big three of today. Like, we spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about Facebook and Instagram ads. Every once in a while we get into Google and YouTube ads, and we run a lot of Facebook and Instagram ads at IndieX. We run some YouTube and Google ads as well. But really, every once in a while we get to experiment with some different traffic sources, and Corinne is often a springboard for a lot of the inspiration that comes from that, just due to the mass amount of testing that she does. So this is going to be a treat. I'm really excited to get a little experimental and nerd out on the data a little bit. So and all of what you're going to say today is totally new to me. I have not been prefaced on any of this information. So I'm super excited to hopefully be surprised too.
Yeah. And hopefully you'll have some questions because obviously when I'm evaluating this, I'm looking at my key metrics and, kind of my gut as to how this stuff is performing. So, maybe you can help me dig in and find out something that I didn't think of, or just that I wasn't thinking to mention. This is going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
Cool. All right. So, so I want to start off with kind of just a baseline. If you listened to this podcast roughly 9 months ago, you'll find the Marketing to Gasp Cold Traffic episode. And in that episode, I was talking about this free plus shipping and handling funnel that I was running to cold traffic. Now, in that episode, I discuss how I first started running this campaign at a huge loss. The first 30 days. And when I tell you guys that I'm testing stuff and like really letting it go, like I have a very high loss tolerance, risk tolerance, so to speak. Jack, what is it that you called that when I was an IndieX client?
Risk aversion?
Yeah, well, there was a tolerance. I don't remember exactly what you called it, but basically, like, what was my tolerance as to how much money I could lose on this funnel before I'd be like, okay, we need to change this.
Your loss tolerance, yeah.
Yeah, loss tolerance. Okay, so I wasn't totally off there. And I have a very high loss tolerance. I mean, my music business, now that it's been going for 14 years or 13, whatever it is.
Shudder.
Yeah, I know, right? Now that it's been going that long, I have a lot of data. And, obviously exposure through my 6-year sponsored stint in the Army and, having over 250 copies distributed there. And, over 1,000 shows and tour dates across the span of my career, there's been a lot of exposure. And so there's a lot of good data to build on. But even still, when I started running Facebook ads to cold traffic for this, it was rough, and fortunately I had enough income streams from this history and these other fans to still keep that up. But I knew that it was going to be risky, and that it could turn my business into a break even for a period of time. And for me, that was worth it because I wanted to make it work, like I was like, in theory,
yeah,
this could work, So, I ran ads. It was probably about 4 to 6 weeks before I wasn't seeing a loss. And when I tell you I was spending money, I was spending money. I had a couple different campaigns running to different locations throughout the world. And the total budget on that ranged anywhere from $250 to $500 per day. So now it wasn't a total loss. I wasn't making $0 and just losing $500 in a day. Trust. I'm not that rich. Okay. That's not something I can afford. But I was looking at ROAS, right? Which is the return on ad spend of roughly, 0.6, 0.7, right? Which is a big loss at, that level of daily budget. But it started to slowly improve, and I was obsessively tracking the metrics every single day, to see, if it was improving, if there were like trends within the week, like, is it better on Monday or, whatever it was. So I was pretty obsessed with it for that period of time. And then it kind of hit its stride. And I think, the pixel started to, when we talk about seasoning an ad account and seasoning a pixel and how it can be impactful, whether you're running good traffic or bad traffic on your ad account, I have never seen more proof of that philosophy than I did in this campaign. Because I was running to green light countries. I was being, pretty assertive about making sure that I was at least running traffic to the right places and optimizing for conversions and, doing it as cleanly as I could. And I didn't change many variables about it. And by the time it had hit that, I can't remember, that 4 to 6 week mark, it started to turn around. And my theory, obviously, Facebook didn't give me a call and tell me why that happened. But, my theory is that the ad account finally had enough data on it to be like, okay, I know who this person is. I know what this user looks like. I understand how to find more people like that. And now I can really find them, But if you think about that, anywhere from $250 to $500 a day for 4 to 6 weeks is a lot of spend, and it really did, take a lot of work. And what's funny is that was enough where Facebook was like, okay, I want to, they had someone contact me, which I think they do for a lot of level of ad accounts now, but they, linked me up with a manager to help me optimize, which didn't help me that much. But I was like, yeah, I'm working with kind of a lower amount of data, maybe a total of 10,000 customers for these lookalikes. And my rep was like, yeah, that is, that's a little low, but your lookalike should still be pretty accurate. So if that gives you an idea of who is normally running ads in Facebook Manager, 10,000 customers as a history is small. Okay. So I think I wanted to kind of give this preface so that you guys understand what all the data is, that when I'm thinking about whether something was successful or not successful, this is the bulk of data that I was dealing with before I then started testing in these other platforms. And that really helped inform my standards as to whether something was doing well or not, and how to select, different pivots along the way. So
I think that's a really good point to make. And that was actually like one of the highlights here that I wanted to touch on at some point in this episode was like, when is it appropriate to start testing different traffic sources? Because I know a lot of people have the inclination to be like, oh, it doesn't work for me on Facebook or Instagram, so like I'm going to just take it to Google and run YouTube ads. Or, oh, it doesn't work for me on XYZ, I'm going to go somewhere else. The kind of the point that you're making here is like, no, I got a lot of data in one place because I stuck it out and I figured out how to make it work before I gave up and said, like, let me test another traffic source, which I think is really important. That's how you validate, an offer. That's how you validate a funnel. That's how you validate copy and creative and so on and so forth. So I think that's a really critical kind of point to make here before we get into the weeds of the actual data that you're seeing on these more experimental campaigns.
Right. Well, and I think too, it should be kind of highlighted that, there are so many things that are just not objective, qualifiable attributes to when you're running a campaign. So like, your offer, right? And the way that you word it and the content that's attached to it. Like, there's so many pieces there that, Facebook and Instagram, just because of there's the reach, right? And Google has more reach, than Facebook and Instagram, does as a platform. But the way that people consume it or use it is different. And so when I look at all these different platforms, in my humble opinion and from my experience, the way that users are interacting with Facebook and Instagram is more conducive to discovering a new artist and then, slowly dripping into their world than some of these other platforms, just by way of how people use the platform largely. So Facebook and Instagram is probably the easiest place, in my opinion, to troubleshoot these things. And when you're not sure if it's the offer, if it's the copy, if it's the audience, if it's whatever, the Facebook Business Manager model allows you to kind of make all those pivots. And in my mind, I was like, if it doesn't work on Facebook or Instagram, it's definitely not going to work anywhere else, because this is the most conducive environment for it to develop. So I had to get it right there first, was my thought. So that's why I went, headstrong into Facebook. And I'll tell you guys right now, I am still running that funnel to this day. And I am still making sales and generating new fans and new customers every single day. And we're recording this on June 22nd. So I've literally been running this for over a year. And there have been, ebbs and flows. There have definitely been times when it was slower. There were times when I had to pivot placements and creative and copy and audiences. And, that's just because when you try to, you can't just turn something on and expect it to run for a year and not fatigue, right? So,
right.
But, largely this is an offer that works. And I was able to prove that through these other ads, and learning everything I did about what worked and didn't work there could inform what was happening in these other platforms. You good with hearing about Facebook and Instagram? Great. So now I just want to make sure you guys had the context and know that I am not some bra that's going to come to you and be like, this works and this doesn't work. And based on like a snippet in history, I am really invested not only in making this work for myself, but being able to communicate that this is a fully fledged, fully tested situation so that you can at least know the context that I tried. Like this, there's a lot of effort in this to make this accurate for you. So
you put everything out on the table here.
Yeah, like full transparency and with lots of effort and love to give you guys my very best. So that said, so what's interesting is that across Google, Snapchat, and TikTok, my impressions, right, the number of people who saw it to the and ratio to the number of people who consumed it to a significant amount was much higher than Facebook and Instagram, which I found was interesting. Yeah, right? So I think maybe I don't totally obviously know why, but largely, I typically see about 10% of people convert from, just being struck in the feed with the ad and then like consuming it, a significant amount. So, which that's also kind of a soft number too, but typically on Facebook, we try to say like 75% video views would be a significant amount of consumption. Yeah. So I basically do the math. All right, how many people saw this? And then what percent of them watched maybe 75% of the video? And usually that's 10-ish%. That's typically the fall off I'm looking for. So when it comes to how Google and especially Google performed was that I had over 72% of people who engaged with it in some meaningful consumption, which was at least half, right? So that's crazy high.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's bonkers high. So it was really interesting because I ran this for about 30 days. I spent about $750. And my my reach to interaction ratio was very high, right? About 72% of people interacted with it, watched it a significant amount, but I only got 893 clicks.
Ooh.
So that's pretty low. That's a pretty low conversion. For, considering that I had, 400,000 impressions. So only 900 of those were clicks. Not terrible. No, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Wouldn't you say? What is that? What's the math? 893 clicks divided by 400,314 is, okay. So that is 0.2%. So 1/5 of 1%. So that's really low. Like typically we're going to want to see what random digital marketing standards, which are super soft and very, not scientific, is like 1 to 2%, right, Jack? That's usually
1 to 2. I mean, that's typically what you see on like Facebook, in a Facebook ad campaign to cold traffic,
right.
Above 1% click-through rate is typically what you're aiming for, just
right.
Very general, soft, like you said.
Yeah. So I found it really interesting that there were, a good number of people who were into what was going on, but didn't click through. And I think some of that is by nature of Google placements. So there are obviously, and I did both display network and YouTube placement for these. YouTube placement did not do nearly as well as the rest did. But if you think about it, if someone is on a web page and, everybody's seen, if you go to Forbes.com because you want to read an article, you're going to see like 50 Google ads while you're scrolling down, and pop-ups and banners at the bottom and on the page itself and whatever. It's an onslaught. And that's because these companies are making revenue by placing those ads there. So there's kind of a lack of accurate gauging of how much people are actually watching it, because are they watching it or are they reading the paragraph that's placed below that video, right? So there's a lot going on there. I did not do search terms or keywords, because if people search for Corinne Campbell on Google, it's well placed. I spell my name a little differently than most people named Corinne. But even if they spell it wrong, like my website is the first thing that comes up. There is an accountant or a CPA in Colorado that happens to have the same name and spelling as me, and she advertises on Google for keywords.
Shout out Corinne Campbell, CPA.
Yeah, shout out to Corinne in Colorado. And sorry for ruining your SEO like forever. So I see that she advertises for that name, and it's probably because,
because you're ruining her SEO.
I'm totally ruining people searching for her name. So anyway, but when people search for keyword like that, I didn't need that advertisement. And searching, having keywords for like female rock artist or female bassist or singer or whatever, that's just not focused enough for me. So the display network did outperform the video placement on YouTube by a lot. But it still only resulted in, 75% of those clicks. Here's the interesting thing. Not a single sale.
Wow.
Not a single sale. $750 spent over a month, 900 clicks, no sales. Like on Facebook, typically I see, I see anywhere from 8 to 10% of people who do click through, I see them convert. So in theory, that should be, if I were to apply that to these clicks, I'd be looking at anywhere from, 80 to 95 sales, 0 sales. So that was really interesting.
That is really interesting.
Yeah. And so that's pretty much all that happened with Google. Now I did have a lot of different creative in there. Google display network ads they can be a bit cumbersome, right? There are a lot of limitations on what kind of headline you can use. Even like the verbiage that's in some of them, there are limits on, free or, things like that really you would want to be able to communicate. There's obviously not like long copy. You can't put in, a whole narrative, right? It's really just like the video, a headline, and a call to action. That's it, So I did set up a retargeting campaign that basically for people who clicked through, they were clicking through to a sales page, and I did retarget people who had landed on that sales page, and I got 3 sales out of that. So I guess that's good.
Yeah, made back some of that money.
Yeah, out of $750, sure, on a free plus shipping and handling phone. Yeah.
So how much do you think the placement of those ads on Google in the display network and on YouTube and your creative limitations played into the conversion rate overall? Because it sounds like that had it certainly sounds like it had a pretty heavy impact on the click-through rate for sure. The ability to really entice somebody with the real estate and the creative that you had to work with sounds like it was a challenge. Yeah,
the click-through on YouTube placements was brutal. Just brutal. I think that, and we've talked about this before with Google ads as well, or specifically YouTube ads, is that, people just aren't there to see an ad. Something to consider is that if there is a platform that allows you to pay to not see ads, even if a person didn't already think an ad was an inconvenience, now they do, right? Like Spotify is the same way, right? You can pay money to no longer get ads. It sets a narrative in the user's mind that like, oh yeah, because ads are bad, right? So when they're using that platform, that's what they think. And that's something where I think, Facebook and Instagram kind of have a leg up, is that they haven't sold some kind of premium membership where you can opt out of ads, in order to have, we'll see. That's something that they could develop, of course, but it's just kind of an assumed thing that if you are using Facebook or Instagram, you're going to see ads, and like people aren't necessarily mad about it. Right. Especially if the ads are good and look like everything else that you want to see while you're in there. So,
well, we'll see how many people are loving the ads that they see after they opt out of iOS 14.
I know. It's so funny because there's such a misconception, and even within our community, like I was in the Indie Pro Facebook group, and someone was like, "Yep, I got the notification of like, do you want to opt out of tracking?" And the number of people who were like, "Yep, I declined tracking," I was like, wow, like if anybody should understand the value of that tracking in knowing that the stuff that you're seeing in your timeline is appropriate for your interests. You know what I mean? It seems like this community should know that more than anything. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get ads. We're not here to shame anybody, but I hope you guys like ads from like Wish and Home Depot and other stuff that you don't actually care about, because that's what you're going to get. Yeah, absolutely. Or, even less relevant stuff, So yeah, I was really actually very surprised about that. And I think that's something that we as marketers have always kind of argued about tracking. Now, obviously there's a privacy thing, and I respect anyone who just feels like they want more privacy. I don't totally understand that, because like, Apple or your phone provider is probably more likely to do something with your 100% geographic location all the time versus Facebook, who's looking at websites, but whatever, that is fine, But that said, as of now, Facebook is still relying on ad revenue to continue functioning. And, it's definitely not something in the platform where people are used to, if I pay extra, I don't have to see ads. So all that to say, I do think that, the YouTube video placement was rough, really rough. And I definitely tweaked the creative and pivoted the creative to try to make it more and more YouTube friendly, understanding that people are going to have to see it as a bumper, or whatever. And really tried to soften the blow of that ad placement as much as I possibly could. And it just didn't work. It didn't work. So, as far as the display network, the limitation of being able to describe the offer more than, free CD, I think it's limited to like 25 characters in the headline. It's very, very limiting. And I think one thing that I have relied heavily upon is the ability to make myself a human to these people. And, I feel like this ads, the Google Ads network and the way it's built up to display is just not as conducive to that, and not as conducive to communicating who you are. And because of how, largely it's placed across the internet, you're going to get a lot of impressions. It does not mean that people are actually consuming it,
It's a really interesting point you make. And I think, I don't know what surprises lay ahead regarding TikTok and Snapchat, but something that does immediately come to my mind is, on more social platforms, or on a platform like Facebook or Instagram that is more social than, Google Display Network and YouTube. When it comes to thinking about the buddy system, what you were kind of running with is an ad experience and a funnel that kind of truncated introduction, education, permission, and affirmation sort of into one experience. But it seems like, I mean, that's a feat in and of itself for any artist on any platform. And, you know, that's why, you know, right out the gate, we kind of came out with this, you know, with that initial episode on your testing of this free plus shipping and handling funnel with a lot of disclaimer of like, yeah, this is hard. Yes, it won't work for everybody. Yes, it probably won't work for you. And that was a feat in and of itself on one platform, but it sounds like the challenge of taking it to another, when the ability to really try to walk people through those, you know, especially the introduction education stage in a few steps in one experience, was really hard to do on Display Network and YouTube.
Yeah, it was very limited. And that was, you know, so I also, like I said, I did run retargeting ads. I had retargeting ads for that specific campaign. I also ran retargeting ads to people who were in my store anyway. And one thing to keep in mind is that with this free plus shipping and handling funnel, they are not being sent to my store. I'm using ThriveCart. So I'm using a sales page that's on my website, and then I'm using ThriveCart. So I was not identifying any users from the store in the free plus shipping and handling retargeting. That was specific to people who had landed on that sales page, which also meant it was retargeting people from Facebook ads that landed on that sales page, because I didn't make a different one, you know?
Right. Yep.
So yeah, so that didn't do well. The Shopify retargeting of people who are looking at products for, you know, whatever reason, because they were there anyway, actually had a better conversion. And I think that does speak to exactly what you're saying. These people already knew who I was, you know, they were there because they were already interested. So I think Display Network can still work very, very well for retargeting audiences who already know who you are. But, you know, there are some limitations as to, you know, how much you can communicate with them. If it's a new product, it might be more difficult than, you know, something that they were looking at already.
Yeah, totally. That's great. So let's unpack the other two of this series of tests that you ran. I'm super eager to hear about TikTok. I'm super eager to hear about Snapchat. I heard some whispers of some of the TikTok stuff that you were doing probably months and months and months ago. And I don't know if that was the same test or if that's something different. Again, I'm kind of going in blind here.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, I'll start with TikTok. And just so you guys know, obviously I wanted to see if I could replicate the free plus shipping and handling funnel, but on both Snapchat and TikTok, because of the way that people consume content there, I obviously made some different creative, right? That was more conducive to that platform, but was still very similar and had some of the same video clips in it. And then I ran it for the fish funnel, but I also ran it for traffic to Spotify. And I tried it with using a toned in landing page and targeting in both TikTok and Snapchat. The targeting selections are pretty not great. You can't drill in nearly as much as you can with Facebook, which for a
super broad.
Oh, it's so broad. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But I did also do some stuff for Spotify because I wanted to see if, you know, there was any difference in how those things translated when there wasn't a purchase involved, right? Especially because these audiences tend to trend younger, and younger tends to trend with lower disposable income. They're less likely to, you know, buy a CD first off, but also to plop down $15 on something that, you know, they didn't already want, you know? So,
right.
So yeah, that was my thinking there. I wanted to diversify the test. So starting with TikTok, it was terrible. And I think I've mentioned this before, you know, with TikTok, sorry, currently their ads manager is actually set up very similar to the way Facebook Business Manager is. And actually all of these platforms are. And we're not going to touch on Twitter today, but I ran Twitter ads as well. And Twitter, TikTok, and Snapchat, their ads manager are just a, you know, carbon copy of Facebook Ads Manager. Not necessarily the features, but they're like, this is the one everyone knows to use. Google's resistant, but everybody else is like, people know how to run Facebook ads. they will generally know how to run our ads, at least navigate our platform if we just like why, if it's not broken, like why fix it?
Don't fix it. Yeah.
So, so that's one thing. If you do end up wanting to get in here and test all these yourself, all three of those platforms, you'll at least be able to navigate, relatively the same as you would in Facebook. That said, it did not perform like Facebook. I am pretty obsessive about my analytics. You guys probably know that. That's something, we have the ones and zeros training in Indie Pro. That was kind of like my baby. That was like my flagship training in Indie Pro was ones and zeros, because I like to know what's happening with my pixel and traffic and sources and all of that. So with TikTok, I think the biggest struggle was figuring out placements. And if you go into TikTok, you can actually identify, the different placements for it. And one issue, and I'm actually going to pull it up so that I can speak more accurately to the names of it, because there's some networks that I don't know the name of because they are foreign. Okay, so basically when I first started running, I set up my countries, and all I was running to was the US, Australia. I think there were some country locations as well. Sorry, guys. It's not quite... Okay, actually, no, I couldn't run to Australia or the UK. I could only run to Canada and the US of the countries that I wanted to run these funnels to.
So purely a North American test, yeah.
Yeah, so I did a purely North American test, and part of that was also so that I could... I know how my ads... respond in these countries. And, from a cultural point of view, I understand how people use TikTok in the US, whereas it could be very different elsewhere,
Sure.
So I just was relying on, wanting to have more base knowledge, of what was probably going to be happening. So I selected only the US and Canada. Now, when you put in the location of demographics on TikTok, it says in tiny dimmed print underneath it, actual ads delivery may vary depending on the supported locations of different placements. And I was like, well, that's fine, because I'm sure, if I just select US and Canada, it will only put it where there is US and Canada. And maybe that was noted as in if I put in a country where it didn't serve, then it would exclude that country. So if I selected something that wasn't available in Canada and I'd selected Canada, that's what I expected, that it would take away Canada as eligible.
Yeah,
what
totally.
It did, that was not true. So that was not the case. This is not an exclusive location list, right? So in Facebook, if you put in a location, it will exclude other locations. Those are the countries to which you are advertising. And if for some reason your product or your ad or whatever is not eligible in a country, it will remove that country, which is why it's exclusive. In this case, this is more of an inclusive list, or a brownie points list. These are the countries I like the best, of all of the options. I don't really understand.
My nice to have targeting list.
Right, exactly. These are my, my favorites, and the rest, whatever. So I was, anyway, so more on that, but that was my biggest issue. So now the thing is, TikTok has a pixel. So I made sure that was installed everywhere. It's on my site. It was on my funnel. It was on my toned in page, right? So, I was definitely tracking everything that was going on. And the placement, at first I went for automatic placements, because I'm like, I don't know about, because they've got TikTok as a general placement, and then they have the newsfeed app series, which is like Buzz Video and Top Buzz and these different things. And then they have Pangle, which is not available in the US or Canada. But I was like, well, it just won't push it there. Automatic placements. That's for. It says that it's available in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Russia, Indonesia, and Turkey, which are all on the red light list for me. So I was like, yeah, I definitely don't want to advertise there. But I just selected automatic placements because all I had was the US and Canada. And then it turned out that I did get pretty much, I monitored it very closely for the first 24 hours. It actually took a really long time to get it approved, which was interesting.
I've had that same experience with TikTok ads.
Yeah. So, whatever, they're trying to get, they're trying to figure it out, whatever, that's fine. It's a newer ad platform. I can give them grace in that department. And I was spending $25 a day on this test. And in the first 24 hours, I had a massive amount of traffic, or of impressions, I should say. And I actually had a lot of traffic as well. My click-through rate was like 10%. I was like, that's crazy. No sales. So I was like, what's going on? And so I looked at the analytics for the source of TikTok, and it was almost exclusively Taiwanese traffic, almost exclusively from Taiwan.
Wow.
And I was like, wait a second. I'm like, that's not the US or Canada. What happened? So I looked back, and the only thing that I could deduce was because I selected automatic placement, it was still placing it in Pangle. And there were a lot of people in Taiwan on Pangle that it thought would be a good match. I don't know. So then I restarted. I shut it off because I was like, I don't need this traffic going to this. And so then I turned on one with manual placements that only had TikTok and the newsfeed app series. Same thing happened. Was getting all kinds of errant countries. And I was like, what is going on? So finally I selected only TikTok. I was like, okay, it's TikTok, US and Canada. Nope. Still tons of red light traffic. So I had a very high click-through rate. It was very cheap. But both on my sales campaigns and on my Spotify campaigns, it was sending all of this terrible traffic. And here's the clitcher. When I went into my Spotify artists, it didn't even show followers or listeners coming from that region, because now you can sort by country. And there weren't people coming from those countries. So maybe they clicked through to the page, but they definitely didn't listen. So that was sending them to a toned in page. I also tried to send direct because I was just wanting to see like what's going to happen with this. And I was like, yeah, it's probably going to make my Spotify look like whatever, because now I'm going to have some city in Taiwan that's like my top, song. Nope, still didn't. So I had a ton of clicks. I spent a total of $500 before I shut it off at $25 a day for each of these campaigns. I spent the bulk of it on the Spotify placements, and it just, I just couldn't believe. If anything, I would have expected to just have a very low click-through rate, but I had a massive amount of traffic from this campaign that resulted in literally nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, literally nothing. I mean, maybe not literally. I might have had like 10 people pop up from that country. And my Spotify listeners are very, very low. I typically don't push my Spotify at all. That's why this was an easy way to test it, is because I knew there wasn't much traffic headed there from anywhere else. So, I got about 10 listeners, and it was crazy to me. Now, one thing that I think could impact that is the kind of targeting, right? Basically, let me dig in and see. I just want to make sure, because this was actually about a month ago. So I want to make sure that I'm not completely wrong here. Let me open it. Okay. Yes. So interest and behavior. What kind of videos are they interested in? Music. That's as much as you can drill down. Music.
It's quite broad.
You think?
Yeah, very, very broad.
Music? Really?
I really wonder what that targeting criteria means, because if you think about the type of content that could be considered just music content, music videos that people consume on the platform. Right. It's a lot of just random dance videos, or
but it's
sometimes
still
the one-off singing video. Yeah, but it is still music. Mm-hmm. But that is really interesting.
Yeah. So one thing I did try in these tests as well as I pivoted to people, you can also filter by people who have taken certain actions to a degree. And so I attempted to just target people who had shared music related videos. That didn't result in anything different. It was still just all a bunch of red light traffic that resulted in nothing. And I did ensure that this campaign was only running at a time when there wasn't any other traffic headed there. And I haven't been releasing music lately. So there's really no reason that there would be any rush to Spotify that would compete with any data that I was going to get from this test. And no, not at all, nothing. So that was fun. And the other thing we should note about TikTok is that, obviously if you run an ad on Facebook or Instagram, from your profile, right? Like it's coming from your profile. So if someone sees your ad and they like it, maybe they don't click through, maybe they don't comment or like on it or share, whatever, but they can still click on the name that's on that and see who you are and see your profile, and it stacks, and this is not the case. Like your ad account, you could run ads on anyone's TikTok.
Right.
And just put whatever you wanted on it and like no one would ever know. So that would be a really great way to sabotage someone, I suppose. But, it's not linked to a TikTok account. So, and again, this is a newer platform. That might be something they're working to develop, so that is something. Now, and just so you guys know, the iOS 14 thing is also impacting TikTok. Mm-hmm. This was prior to that. So, I just want to make sure to note that, these campaigns were completed before that change was implemented. So that's not a factor in these campaigns.
Quick question for you on TikTok.
Yeah.
For anyone who might not know or hasn't even ever logged into the TikTok ads platform, what kind of campaign objectives were you working with? Was it conversions, clicks, just views?
So with the fish funnel, I was going for conversions.
Yep.
And I at first tried for purchase conversions on the TikTok pixel, and then just for views, view content, essentially. It's called something else, I think, in this, but essentially a view content on the TikTok pixel. That didn't work either. So I was like, okay. So then I went to the toned in page, attempted to create a conversion from a button click, which resulted in nothing, and then just try to get people to the page. To be honest, when I pivoted between those, I had the same amount of click-through rate and the same amount of traffic. It didn't really vary. It wasn't clear that it was optimizing differently,
That's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it was weird because I did think that if a lot of people think if you run for conversions, you're less likely to attract crap. Depending on how the higher the level of conversion, especially if there's any kind of monetary attachment, the less you're going to have. If the machine is optimizing well, the less likely it will be that you'll get a bunch of bot or spam or, invalid traffic, because in theory, the machine is looking for people who spend money. Bots don't spend money. Spending money is probably the one thing that bots can't do. Bots can do everything. They can like, they can comment, they can share, they can put in their email, they can interact, they can click through multiple things. And I'm actually going to get into that shortly. But you can make bots do a whole lot to look like real people. So don't let that fool you. But the one thing that bots probably won't do is spend money. So
spot on. Yep.
So that was kind of the result of the TikTok ads, which was very underwhelming. And, I was disappointed. I'm not the typical TikTok audience, but it's obviously just a huge bolster of, lots of music happening. I mean, the 502s had something go viral on TikTok and then it blew up their Spotify for a minute, So there's obviously music discovery happening on the platform. But I don't think there's going to be a way to make that happen with advertising, at least not right now. So
totally
not in its current state. So I did run again. I was running a couple of these for traffic only, and that didn't result in anything different. So it was the same countries, the same amount of traffic, the same click-through rate, and the same amount spent. Cost per click maybe went down a little bit, but that's about it. Maybe by like 20% or so. Otherwise, it was pretty much identical in results. So, but it's very misleading because the CPM was like super cheap. Like on Facebook, my CPM tends to run for something like the fish funnel tends to run somewhere around $12-ish, maybe 10 to 12. That's typical for me. And you cannot gauge your results on what I'm saying, right? But if I'm running to green light countries and going for conversions, my CPM typically tends to be between $10 and $12. And I just know that because I've been doing it for so long. It could be a tenth of that. It could be 5 times that for you. Like it's really, it's not a relative thing between artists. But
and CPMs swing so variably just based on what's happening on the platform.
Yeah, based on how many people are advertising and all of that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but the CPM was very low. It was, somewhere around, $2. So, but if it's all in Taiwan, I would certainly hope so. Like based on the optimization, I would rather have paid 5 times that to reach the right people. But the machine just wasn't sophisticated enough to know how to do that. So after a while, I shut that off. Okay. So
I'm waiting with bated breath to hear if Snapchat was similar. It's been it's had an advertising platform for longer than TikTok. Mm-hmm. I'm on the edge of my seat here because this is one that you haven't told me anything about. Oh. Not even a whisper.
Okay. Well, all right. So with Snapchat, one thing I'll say up front, again, very similar to Facebook Ads Manager, it's a little different. Their approval process takes the longest of any ads I've run. It definitely, and Google takes a long time too. They all 3 of these kind of took a long time, but Snapchat easily took the most time, which I'm fine with that. I plan my campaigns ahead. If I have actually time sensitive, I get it through approval and have it ready to turn on at the time that it's supposed to go live. I don't just try to get it to go live, but I'd say it took about 3 days to get through, which is a long time. So the targeting is a little better. You can target more than just music. And I'll actually I want to pull just so I can give you guys like the actual deets and not be summating. So I was able to select basically all of my green light countries. I didn't have any limitations as far as that was concerned. I did limit the ages to 13 to 40 just for fun. I don't think that probably lost a ton of people on Snapchat. And then their audiences are a little better. So I could choose basically a lifestyle target, and then a subdirectory of that was music fans, and a subdirectory of that was rock music fans. So that's pretty good. When I'm running the fish funnel on Facebook, I'm only really, I've narrowed it down to alternative rock as an interest. I don't use artist targeting. I'm using broad alt rock targeting, and that's working great. But again, my pixel has a ton of data on it. So I could probably run it wide and not have any targeting on it, and Facebook would find the right people, just because it already has so much information. It's I don't even need you. Tell me what countries I'm allowed to send this to, and I got you. That's basically what Facebook is saying right now, which is amazing, and great. As long as the offer is identical, right? If I were running a totally different offer, it'd have to be a whole, there's a whole other learning process that goes with that. So I ran that. I had turned off basically the way Facebook says expand beyond this audience if it will provide better results. That's also an option in Snapchat. So initially I had that turned off. I wanted to see what would just happen with this fan base. Otherwise I didn't limit, any of the devices or whatever. I just had it set to automatic bid. And I started it out at $30 a day. And the action on it was a swipe. So The CPM on this, and I pivoted a bit with some of that, but that was the campaign settings that got the most spend. So the CPM was so low. It was under $1. It was 98 cents.
Ooh, yeah.
Crazy, right? And I think that's because, Snapchat is short form, right? And it definitely it has the opportunity to show more content to people rapid fire, right? So that's part of, knowing about how the platform works for the users. So with this campaign, I got basically 1.2 million impressions because I didn't need to spend much. And out of that, I had about 15,000 swipe ups. So
wow.
That's still around 1%, right? It sounds like a huge number, but now out of those 1.2 million impressions, only 90,000 watched it for 2 seconds, right? That's kind of
interesting,
which is very low barrier, but in ratio to how long content is on Snapchat, it's actually not that low.
Yeah.
So, that wasn't terrible, right?
Interesting front end metrics. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like the conversion funnel numbers are a little like, whoa, So yeah, I mean, that was crazy. And, that's why I'd end up spending a little under $1,000 on this, is because it seemed to be doing really well. Now here's the thing. I ran it on my fish funnel, on my free plus shipping and handling. I also ran it in the same way that I was testing the TikTok ads. So I was sending it to a toned in page and then sending direct to Spotify. These are green light countries, right? So, I was watching the analytics like a hawk. When I was sending it to the fish funnel, I was getting a lot of traffic from not the countries I targeted. In fact, I had a slew of traffic from Singapore. And I was like, what is going on with this? So I looked at the placements. I looked at the ad. I was like, what can I possibly have missed in here that would have resulted in that? Is it the time of day? What's going on? I literally could not find anything that would have opened it up except that they started running, traffic to Singapore. When I looked at, and I thought, well, maybe something's off with, the numbers, or maybe that's their system, checking it. If you ever have a Facebook ad that you put into review and you watch your real-time analytics, chances are that you're going to see a ton pop up, a ton of pings pop up from Northern California, because Facebook is sending its bots to check your buttons and check your whatever, So here's the weird thing. The weird thing is in the case of TikTok, lots of people or lots of profiles or whatever ended up on the landing page, but did not take action, right? That's all that Taiwanese traffic. They ended up there. They supposedly clicked or swiped or whatever it is that they did. I think it's a click on TikTok. They clicked through and they landed on the page, but then didn't do anything, right? So that sounds like bots to me. Now with Snap, they clicked through, got to the page, and then clicked on buttons. I had clicks, from Singapore. I had 80% of the clicks on that page were coming from Singapore. And I was like, well, but they're clicking through, I'm not trying to advertise to Singapore, but if it translates to Spotify listeners, maybe that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it didn't. No, there was no activity on my Spotify profile at all from Singapore. It was the same thing again, maybe 10 users actually made it through. And this is toned in, so they're made to be flexible. And of course, I was running, I ran to the toned in page, and something that I processed throughout all of these tests was, well, maybe there's fall off because the toned in page has all of these possible selections, right? And if we tell you guys anything about a landing page, it's don't give people options, right? There's the arrest of choice where they're like,
Yep.
I don't know. And then they just leave. So, so then I was like, okay, well, I really like being able to watch the analytics, but just, in true commitment to the test, I'm going to run one that is direct to Spotify, thinking maybe that would lower the barrier. And nope, not there either. So it was shocking to me. I spent almost $1,000 on Snapchat. I spent $750 in TikTok, and got nothing, like really nothing substantial from it at all. And I'm kind of glad that I was really, only sending it to Spotify because, like I said, I don't really push anyone to my Spotify. So I am not overly concerned about Spotify's machine learning about me.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, well, whatever happens, there happens. I don't care. If I get huge in Indonesia, like,
great.
Yeah. Like, I'm not going to push to trigger cities, but I'm also not going to like care essentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was really kind of crazy to see how similarly these platforms were laid out to Facebook, but how just incredibly different they are, especially in the optimization. My biggest irk about these two campaigns was that it was not delivering to the countries I specified, or it was, but only partially, So it was strange to me. And I don't even know if I told you guys, but I also, when I was doing the fish funnel in Facebook, I actually attempted some tests running for conversions in red light countries.
I think we did touch on that. Yeah.
Did we touch on that? Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
Those ads running to, Russia and Israel, those converted more and actually made me sales, like very meager sales and not at all it was no return on ad spend, but those were able to bring me more valid traffic than running to supposedly the US and Canada in Snapchat and TikTok. It was bonkers to me. And I think it really speaks to the sophistication of the machine that the Facebook and Instagram algorithm are running from. And Google, I promise you guys that I will be running a lot more in Google, because in theory, it should be brilliant. It should be a genius. Google has existed for, for multiple decades, has so much information about all of these users, way more than Facebook and Instagram have, really, when you're talking about buying behavior and lifestyle and consumption of media, right? Google should be the absolute best at this. It should have the most information. But there's something very different about how its machine is set up. And, if you're ever wondering why we seem so hot to trot on Facebook and Instagram, it's not because Facebook as a platform is special. It's not because Instagram as a platform is special. It's that the machine learning, right? The so-called algorithm is brilliantly coded to do the right thing, versus some of these other ones. And that's really what it's about.
Yeah, and I think going back to what we were saying kind of earlier on in the episode, it has a lot to do with how you can influence user behavior on certain platforms, and on a very social platform with with machine learning that's really dialed in, you can do a lot, and that's marketing,
Definitely. So I know I talked a lot, you guys, and this episode is long, but as you can tell, this is something I am mega passionate about. And I've actually decided that I'm going to start streaming on Twitch some of my marketing stuff when I'm working on, various campaigns or email things or, the tech stuff, right? So I'll be sure to make an announcement once that's actually live. Obviously, you can search me on Twitch and find me, but if you're interested, it's not going to be like a regularly scheduled thing. It's really just going to be here and there. But if you're interested in just watching over my shoulder as I do all these bonkers things that I'm testing for you guys, I'll just verbalize what I'm finding and you can kind of see it in progress. But yeah, I think that this is something that I'm mega passionate about. To me, it's very interesting. And hopefully there's enough of you advertising nerds out there that found this interesting too.
If anybody out there is like me, I'm sure you did. Because I enjoyed it.
If anyone is like us, then we did.
This was great. This was so good. Thanks for opening up the hood and kind of letting us into the guts of these tests, Corinne. This was great.
Yeah,
super
absolutely.
Cool.
For sure. Well, if you guys aren't, if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a message in the comments. If there's a test that you've been dying to see run and like you don't want to spend $1,000 on it, or if you have questions about these particular campaigns, please do leave us comments on the YouTube channel. I'll be checking those so that we can just give you more information. But also, if there's something that you want to see, we can test that for you. I think that's something that I wish we could do more, little case studies. And obviously, it's different when you put it across multiple artists. But bare minimum, I could tell you what I'm finding, right? So yeah, please do comment there. If you're listening on audio, you can always go to our YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/Indepreneur, find this episode, leave us a comment there. And as always, if you want to consume all of the things, you can go to Indepreneur.io and sign up for Indie Pro if you're not already signed up. Because give yourself a few months in there and you'll start sounding like a nerd like me.
Only the nerdiest.
Yes, and we'd love to have you a part of the geek family. But that's all I got for us today, Indies. Thanks so much for hanging out for this long one. Hope you loved it. We'll see you next week on Creative Juice.